Today, the U.S. Commerce Department released its latest snapshot of the American economy. As Amna Nawaz explains, the report showed that the U.S. economy, measured by the country's gross domestic product, or GDP, grew at an annual rate of 4.1% from April through June of this year. That is the strongest quarter of growth since 2014.
Judy, that growth came as the president was threatening to impose more tariffs and in the wake of tax cuts from the past year. Joining me now to dig into what this all means and why it's happening is David Wessel. He's the director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institution. He is also a contributing correspondent to the Wall Street Journal. David Wessel, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Good to be with you.
So put that number into context for us. We heard the president touting it earlier, 4.1 GDP growth. What does it mean?
It means that we produced a lot more stuff and there was a lot more income in the second quarter. It's a very good quarter. Almost everything we care about in this report was pointing up, with the only exception of housing construction. It's not quite as unprecedented as the president likes to suggest. We actually had 4 quarters in the Obama administration where growth was more than 4.5%. But it's undoubtedly good news.
So presidents before have hit it in past administrations, but this time let's talk about some of the contributing factors. Trade. We've heard a lot about the president's trade wars. In this case, exports actually surged, up 9.3%. How should we understand that?
Right. Well, you know, presidents always get more credit or blame for the economy than they deserve. And in this case, I think the president gets credit for 2 parts of this. One was the tax cuts are boosting spending in the economy, maybe boosting business investment. That's what you expect. But you're absolutely right. It looks like there was a big surge in U.S. exports, particularly soybeans to China, and because importers there are trying to avoid the tariffs that China's imposing to counter Trump's tariffs. So this was an unsustainable 1-quarter boost in exports, particularly of farm stuff, that's not going to repeat.
Well, you say unsustainable. So China, we know, had placed that 25% tariff just on soybeans, right? Actually, they're up 50%, soybeans from May of this year, from May of the previous year. Is there a counterbalancing dip now on the back end?
Yes, absolutely.
For sure.
It's highly likely that that will not continue. The trade will be a drag in the third quarter.
Okay, talk to me about the tax cuts now. Government spending was also up in this last quarter. What kind of factor did that play?
Well, the tax cuts play some factor. We know that when you cut people's taxes, they spend more money. Business investment spending has not been great, but it's up a little bit, and that's probably in part because of the tax cuts. Federal government spending is up, you're right. That was mostly defense, and defense tends to bounce around a lot quarter to quarter. One thing that's interesting is state and local government spending, which is more money than the federal government, is not increasing. It's been very, very sluggish.
There's another economic indicator I want to ask you about, household savings.
Right.
We know these are estimates we get, right? When we get the GDP numbers, they often go back and revise them. Household savings is something we've had a recent revision on. What does that tell us?
Right. I think that may be one of the most striking things in this report. The government went back and re-estimated a lot of the numbers over the last couple of years. They always do this as they get more data, more details from tax returns and stuff like that. They said that Americans saved twice as much in 2017 as been previously estimated. And what that means is there was a lot of concern that if consumers or households hadn't saved very much money, they would be reluctant to spend in the next 6 months and a year. But that fear has really gone away. It turns out households have built up their savings a little bit. It's obviously upper-end households more than lower-end households. And that gives people more confidence that the consumer spending that we've seen in this quarter could continue.
So for those average households, the GDP conversation can be so abstract sometimes. What are these new numbers today, this 4.1%? What does it mean?
Well, one thing is when the economy grows strongly, businesses tend to hire. That means more people get jobs. And that's why the unemployment rate has come down so far at a 17-year low. But the GDP report does not tell us how the pie is sliced. It tells us that the pie is getting bigger, if pies can get bigger, but it doesn't tell us how the pie is being sliced. And we know from other data that it's not being sliced evenly. Most of the growth we've had recently has disproportionately gone to people at the top, and wages of average people are not keeping up with inflation.
At the same time, the president deserves credit for this strong growth so far.
No, I would say the president gets credit for it, and the perverse reaction to his trade war boosted growth in the second quarter, and the tax cuts probably helped.
David Wessel, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.